Hey, I'm Keenan Fry, and this is the Acid Drip. Robin Williams! Alright, so today's a unique day because I have now completed phase 1 of my next poster project. So this is about 300 hours into the project. But before we get started with all that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Kevin and Crystal, who are now 7 months in to their pregnancy, and they're expecting their firstborn kid in the next, I think 6 or so weeks, sometime early October. So baby Frosthammer. That's who this is actually dedicated to, so you'll see that in a second. Shout out to them. Shout out to my friend Tall Drew, who helped me design my PC build. So that's another project that I have going on. I've been building a computer. And I've had the good fortune of having my friend Drew help me out, Drew the Wandering Tree, and another friend of mine, Nick, who helped me out as well and is helping me do the final build. Some exciting news about that is I bought a Wacom 24-inch Cintiq. It's the really nice, massive Wacom, but the processor on my computer really isn't strong enough to render anything that I draw on it. So with this new computer build, I will be able to take the next step in the Veritas font project that I've been doing, and I will be able to do it on my large format tablet, which will make a huge difference because instead of using this tiny little tablet that's kind of impossible to work with because just the real estate of it's so small, I'll now have this big, large format screen to work with. And then of course the computer is going to be stronger. So a lot of new stuff is in the pipeline to get done. And this is kind of just one of the many projects that I've been chipping away at in the meantime while this whole COVID-19 thing has been happening. I've got more stuff coming up in the next few weeks that I'm excited to share with you guys. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into this. And I'm excited to reveal to you the black and white version. I'm wearing my gloves because this is lucite and it's designed to protect the page itself. I'm using a 100% cotton Arches sheet of 140 press, so basically the paper, it's really porous and any oils on my skin will basically get onto it. There's already some stains on there, so it's not entirely the end of the world if I were to touch it with my hands, but that's something I want to avoid. So just going to take the lucite off. Here it is. There's a lot going on with this piece. For starters, I did this initially back in 2009, 2008, 2009. I was in high school at the time, my senior AP art class. I ended up dropping out of the AP art class because I didn't have the time to commit to it, and I went for advanced studies art. And basically the teacher really didn't even teach us anything. They gave us an assignment, walked out of the room, and one of the assignments was to just do a freeform art project. And I, at the time, was listening to Tool. And, this looks a lot like some Alex Grey artwork. And that's because at the time, when I initially came up with the concept in 2008, I was completely immersed in the 10,000 Day record. I'll throw an image of that up in the video so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But unlike other artists, the famous director David Cameron, and others like Ridley Scott, there's some interviews with those guys, and the interviewer's asking them hey, who are some of your influences? And literally they say nobody, which I think is supremely disserving to the artist community, because if you are influenced by something, you should tell people what it is that influenced you and then explain how it influenced you. And then what that shows on your part is courage to admit that something influenced you and there is somebody else's work shining through, somebody else's influence shining through your work. But what it also shows is a confidence in your own voice. I think that if you're afraid to admit to what your influences are, you're too afraid of criticism that someone might say, well, you're just a copycat. And the reality is most people who offer criticism of art or music or writing are too stupid or lazy themselves to make anything. So if somebody is criticizing you, saying oh, your stuff just looks like a ripoff of this, honestly, fuck those people. And I would just say, like, keep working at what you're doing and don't hesitate to show people what it is you've made and to explain, like, where it is it comes from. It actually shows a certain level of intelligence on your part when you can clearly articulate, like, where your ideas came from and how you put them together to make something new, because we call that teaching. And the value of being able to take your idea and explain it to somebody else and teach that other person how to use influences in a creative manner, that's really imperative, and it demonstrates a masterful level of understanding on your part of your artistic process. So, you know, in music, one of my teachers used to tell me there's really like 5 like common knowledge black belts to achieving like virtuosity, but like the secret 6th black belt is being a teacher and having the ability to take whatever musical knowledge or whatever artistic or, you know, creative knowledge you have and pass it on to somebody else. That's the secret 6th black belt to achieving mastery of any sort of creative output, any creative pursuit. So kind of like using this as a teaching moment, going back to the influences for starters. When I first did this piece back in 2008, 2009, it was way rougher and I didn't have the steady hand that I have now. And I redid it in 2011. And I have a photocopy of the redo that I did in 2011. So for starters, like, it's obviously been mirrored. The transformation's been mirrored. So it's been reflected to the other side. It's been transformed. But what you see here is the same eye kind of shape roughly here to give you kind of like some geography to kind of anchor yourself to. But what you notice is the head is very flat, whereas here it's slanted, and there's a crown piece, which clearly results in the serpent emerging from the forehead. None of that is in this one. There's the conch shell right here, which is totally new. That's not here. The nose piece is new. The design work in here is very much reminiscent of what's in here, but I replaced this sort of graphic line work with a more fluid floral line work. A lot of what's happening in here is also translated to here, but it's cleaned up and more intricate. And the biggest change, which you can't see in this draft, comes in these revisions. So this project is more than 300 hours deep as of now. Okay, so in the early drafts, I was trying to get to this final form. I had an idea in my head to make this resemble the Cleopatra bust and a lot of the other like famous Egyptian busts. What matters is that in this design here, there's a series of areas that are shaded. And what I'm looking at there is where the continuity is in the line form. See, what ended up happening is I wanted to create a line system that was based off of 2 lines creating one shape. So if the 2 lines create one shape, they sort of think of it like this, like you have 2 lines forming a pipe, and then the shape is the actual combination of those 2 lines forming the pipe, the 2 lines being the 2 walls of the pipe or the 2 sides of the pipe. Anything that fits in between is the fill, and then the thickness of the fill is the stroke. And so I was trying to kind of plan out the fill and stroke. So technically these individual graphic lines are actually shapes, and what's been designed is that they're container shapes that are each going to be able to separate the various colors in this piece. So in this one, where it was multiple container shapes that were not connected by one series of lines or pipes, as I was explaining earlier, 2 lines forming one pipe. So a series of that, meaning that those 2 lines or single pipe contains everything as a single complete series, like a complete circuit. Instead, it was made of a series of smaller subcutaneous forms that were separated and not connected. There are still subcutaneous forms, like for example, an obvious one is this eyebrow or this eyeliner. But those are forms that are designed to be that way, that are details to represent the makeup of the Egyptian bust. The other forms, like for example these graphic forms up in here and in here, they're all designed to be a single line, and they connect from the base of the snake all the way around the head. They actually wrap around underneath the lotus that's appearing here, and they wrap into this section and into here. So technically all of the graphic line work is actually one pair of lines. It's a pair of lines or one shape. It's one complete contained shape. And that was something that conceptually I didn't have the ability to keep track of back in 2008 when I did the initial drawing, and later on when I redid it in 2011, I was trying to do that, but I still couldn't actually get it there. So that was something I kind of had to just figure out on my own, going back and revising it, which is what this first draft was. Now, going into the second draft, I kind of had this idea for wanting to create the snake crown piece, and you can kind of see that I'm roughly outlining the shape of the head, where I wanted the boundary of the headpiece to be kind of how I wanted the outline of the whole principal head, the forehead, to be, because this was getting completely restructured. This had to have a slant added to it. This had to be extended outwards. This whole piece was brand new. I wanted to measure the thickness. I kind of wanted to have a slant to the forehead so that from the bridge of the nose, where the nose, this top of the gallbella, this arch that's inside your nose is called your gallbella. From the bridge of the gallbella going straight up to past the crown of the forehead, I wanted that to be one continuous uninterrupted line, as it is here. There's little accents that are happening that are kind of poking out, but if you actually go from the tip of here to here, it's basically a straight line. That was something I wanted to design into it, and then the amount of space between the back of the cobra hood and the line, I wanted it to be really close and have tension, but I also wanted it to be very clearly illustrated that there was a space between the two. That's kind of what I was deriving in this draft. In this one, I took a lot of what was initially presented and I just embellished upon it. I kind of figured out how I wanted to line up the last few vestiges of this corner piece, which is what appears here. I was kind of solving that section right in here. There's some open space in here that isn't actually proportionate to the final draft, and that's because here I was figuring out how I wanted the crown piece to line up. So I kind of drew this initial crown piece, which you can see right here. That initial crown piece that you see there ended up here, but I needed to move it and adjust it to get it to fit in position. So there was a lot of massaging of the line work in this piece. A lot of things didn't line up, but they were isolated sort of graphic events that I liked, that I wanted to move into position and sort of juxtapose next to other graphic events that I liked. And then I wanted to take these events that were separate from each other and join them and make them a single graphic idea, a unified idea from all these separate isolated concepts that I had throughout my drafts. In this one, I also kind of start playing with the size, and I get the idea for the conch shell. So initially, I didn't really know what I was going to do for the chin strap, and then I sort of started to embellish it, and then I knew I wanted to do the graphic shell that you see there at the end. Here is where we get really close to what the final draft is. And we have the actual cobra head as it nearly appears here. This is very close to the final one. There's some accents that are in this crown piece that get evolved and sort of developed further here, particularly in this area of the snake. There's some here that are advanced out there. This graphic shape that you see, this circular shape, actually is tessellated 3 times here. So it's in a pair, another pair, and another pair. So 3 pairs. So it's tessellated. So I drew it once and then tessellated it 3 times over, then reflected it, and then tessellated the reflection another 3 times. So like figuring out how to interlock that shape was really hard. It was the most painstaking thing. It was one of the last things that I inked on this draft because I had to have like a really steady hand to do it. I warmed up for like drawing 2 hours before, doing tons and tons of other line work on this piece, and then when I felt like I had hit the 2-hour mark and my hand was warmed up, I actually approached drawing these 6 pairs of tessellated circles. They're kind of like more like interwoven spirals, to be honest with you, that are reflected against each other to kind of like symmetrically mirror each other. That's the best way to explain it. It was really hard for me to mentally keep track of which lines were which and how I was like organizing it, but I'm really proud of these 3 little shapes, these 3 pairs of little shapes. It's one of the most complicated things I did in this entire piece. Like, I guarantee you, hands down, executing that, the spiral, and parts of the cobra were basically the hardest parts, the most painstaking parts of this, just because it really took a lot of finesse. Now, this is not actually the final draft. As you can see, it's still facing the other way, right? So actually, the final draft is underneath this. Okay, so as you can see in this one here, the way the lucite was laid out, it was initially designed, the drawing was initially designed to face towards the left. Because it was a trace of the other one. Now the reason why I flipped it around is that down here is where the Arches France logo is. I talk a lot about Arches paper, about the quality of it, but I want to talk about some technical issues that I ran into with this. For starters, this is 140 pound, and I did not want to use 140. I wanted to use 300. 300 pound watercolor hot press, cotton, 100% cotton paper is kind of like the gold standard for anything watercolor. The reason why is the 300 pound, it's thicker, and it literally feels like a bed of cotton. It's amazing to actually just feel the texture on a 300 pound piece of cotton. And it's not literally 300 pounds. So for those of you that don't know kind of how the rolls work, when you go to a store to buy paper, what the mill does is they roll a sheet of paper and they wind it like 1,000 times around a single core. So it's like a cardboard sort of core, like a giant toilet paper roll almost. And they wind the paper around that and they weigh that roll. And the weight of that roll is the weight of the paper. So 1,000 winds of this paper is 140 pounds. For 300 pound, it's 1,000 winds of that paper is 300 pounds. So it's double, it's more than double the weight of this. So that's not actually how much the sheet of paper weighs, that just, you know, because it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm buying a 300 pound piece of paper, but you pick it up and it's like, this isn't even a pound. Like, what are you talking about? So what's going on with this is it's 140 pound. It's good stuff, but it's not like the actual gold standard. And the reason why I had to resort to 140 is because this box, so this is actually still taped to a light box. So under here is my light box, and it's not actually a true light box, it's a light pad. I'm looking to invest in a gagne light box, and I'm going to have to call Gagne Incorporated and ask them to custom build me one. The difference between a light box and a light pad is that a light pad inserts light from the sides. So this thing, if I actually kind of briefly hold it up for you, is very thin. You can see how thin the actual pad is. LEDs along the sides going in strips that are illuminating light from the sides, reflecting off of a white backdrop and then bouncing through the clear top. The problem with that is it's not very high quality. There's a lot of LED light pads out there, and frankly, they're kind of garbage. Light pads are just shit. You need to get a light box. Now, a light box is defined by the fact that it's an actual box. It's really thick and bulky, and the value of that is you have sometimes a ballast or an incandescent bulb in the older ones. The modern ones do use LEDs, but they tend to lean more towards ballasts. And basically the way it works is the bulbs are underneath the actual plane of glass. They're not from the sides, and they're thicker, and they emit a larger amount of light. And because they're directly placed under the glass, more light illuminates through the glass and then through the plate. Now, the quality of that light is called foot candles or lumens. Okay, that's how you measure how much light comes out of a light box. Okay, foot candles or lumens. And the problem with that is if you call up most of these art stores and say, hey, how many lumens does your box have? They don't know. Like 99% of these people can't tell you that. Okay, they'll say like, oh, it's good for 300 pound. It's not. I have this pad. It's rated on Amazon for 300 pound. It's not. It's not capable of doing 300 pound. I have a sheet of 300 pound that I tried sketching this onto, and it did not work. It came out really muddled, and it was very difficult. Using the 140 pound with a sheet of lucite, it was difficult to transfer this. It's unfortunate that the only solution is to really go to a company like Gagne and say, hey, I need you to custom build me a box. And they say, well, it's going to cost, $500 to $600. If you feel like you're going to be doing a lot of art that is transfer based, where you're doing a draft and then you're revising that draft and then revising and revising and revising, the best thing you can do in that situation is to just save up for a gagne box. You call them up, you tell them, hey, this is what I need, and they will custom build it to your specs. You can request everything down from the dimensions of the box in terms of how wide, which is really important for me because part of the reason why I picked up this pad is it was as close as possible to the width that I wanted to work with. But I would actually prefer to have a box that's wider than this. Of course, the height, the actual thickness of the box, that depends on whatever bulbs you're putting in. What you want to do is you want to look at photography lights. And you have to go and talk to guys who do photography because they know a lot about light. They'll talk to you about color temperature, which isn't super relevant because when a photographer is thinking about lights, they're talking about how the light alters the picture. And you're obviously not using the light to take a photo. You're using the light to illuminate a piece of paper so you can transfer it. So the color temperature isn't too relevant. You want something that's like a little bit softer on the eyes because you are going to be staring at this. You probably want something that's a little bit more on the yellow side. Blue light is really harsh on your eyes. That's the kind of light that you get from your screens, your computer screens and such. That's why they have these special glasses that are yellow light filters. You put them on, you're looking at your regular computer screen. The yellow tint in the glasses neutralizes some of the blue light, and it makes your cornea last longer, and it basically prevents you from going blind because you will suffer retina damage from just staring at a screen all the time. So if you can get a bulb from a gagne box that's in the yellow color temperature chain, the yellow color temperature range, do that. And the best way to figure out what bulb you need is to talk to your friends who are photographers. Figure out who's a good photographer, or like if you don't know anyone who's a photographer, just Google photography studios. Find somebody who runs a studio in your area, call that person up and say, I want to pay you for a 1-hour photo shoot, but I don't want you to take any photos. I just want you to school me on your light bulbs. Tell me everything you know about lighting. I'll pay you an hour, and they'll tell you like, hey, that's 180 bucks. And that kind of sucks because you're at 180, maybe $200 cash. But realistically, that's what you need to pay a photo guy to sit down and talk to you. And if you sit down and talk to that photo guy and you pay them, they're going to be very generous, and they're going to kind of tell you like what all their little secrets are. And that's where you really learn a lot about, color temperature and lumens and foot candles. And then the value of that is later on when you decide to get your own high quality camera, you know how to set up your own camera and your lighting rig, which is actually more important than the actual camera itself, is the lighting you're using. You can get away with a really cheap, like $400, $500 camera with like a decent lens if you have a killer lighting setup. If you know how to set up a 3-point lighting system, you will have immaculate photos, and you will get a better quality photo out of that than, you know, somebody who's walking around with the latest like $4,000 Nikon whatever, and they don't know how to set up lighting. They don't know what lighting is. Those people have all the money in the world to spend on gear, but they don't know how to use it. So like leverage what you have. It's worth paying people for that private tutor lesson because it schools you on something that you don't know anything about, and that guy spent 20 years studying photography, and I guarantee you they're going to be able to lay some real heat on you. And those are the people you want to hunt down because they're going to teach you how to be better at your craft, because you're not going to have to spend 20 years hunting around for that information. They did it for you. And if you're friends with that guy because you paid him for that lesson, maybe later on that guy will photograph your work for you. And that's another thing you can do, is that same person who taught you how to do lighting, you can later on call that person up and say, hey, I have a portfolio that I'd like you to shoot, and I'll pay you a flat rate. I will set up all my artwork on boards, and you're just going to set up your camera, and I'm going to swap the boards, and you're going to machine gun through the photos. And if you do something like that, I guarantee you, you'll have a good looking portfolio, you'll learn about lighting, you'll learn how to get the equipment you need to build the light box you need to do this kind of work, and your professionalism will show because you'll have a quality portfolio, but you'll also have a quality product, and you'll be able to demonstrate the quality of your product because you'll be able to take good photos of your work. So the next step for this is for me to paint it, but that's going to happen later on. I want to photo document it while it's in black and white, and I want to put out some prints. I'm going to be photoshopping this so that it has kind of like a nice bright yellow outline, and then I'm going to be printing that on black shirts. That'll be kind of one of the first t-shirts I print, and then I'll be doing a color version of this. So yeah, working with somebody who knows a lot about lighting, go to a photo studio, find somebody who knows what they're talking about, and get their help. They're going to make the difference. The photo studio that I go to is Lightworks in San Francisco. I've been working with them since 2018 that I printed, which is the Flash Tower project. So I have another project that I photographed with them prior to that in 17 that you haven't seen yet because, to be honest with you, I haven't been able to finish it, largely because of technical issues with my computer not being strong enough to do what I need it to do. Really frustrating. But finally, I'm going to have the machine to do it. So a lot of projects that have been in the works are going to get knocked out. Again, that project from 17 that's kind of been on ice for the last 3 going on 4 years is going to get knocked out probably towards the end of 2021. I know that that sounds like not anytime soon, but I have 2 projects that I'm currently in the process of finishing. And then I'm thinking about revisiting a 3rd project, and then by the time summer hits for 2021, I will probably be ready to reapproach my project from 2017, which was Clarity. So that's kind of exciting because that one's been on ice for now 4 years almost, and I started that project in 2010. So that one, I started 11 years ago. This one I started in 2008. Now it's getting done in 2020. Sometimes it's just a matter of like working with the resources you have and acknowledging that, like, yes, maybe things would go better if you had a better computer, if you had a better setup. Maybe things would be easier, but instead of working into a corner, you need to work towards your strengths. Again, that's why I think the next step for me is to really get that gagne box and work on projects that I can currently complete with the setup that I have now. And when I have the computer rig built, that'll be where the next step takes. But I'll let you guys know about how that goes later on down the line as that develops. On a side note, I've been struggling a lot lately with my projects and my work, but I've been persevering through it. I got my master's exams done. Want to give a shout out to my parents, my mom and dad, George and Julie. Thank you. My uncle Steve and my uncle Marty, and my aunt Janet and all my other relatives out on the East Coast, Bob and Sue, Katie, Jackie, and then of course my little sister Monica. It was really cool seeing my family on Zoom for the family reunion. It was also really cool to hang out and talk to you guys, talk to Dennis and Carolyn. It was good seeing you guys. So, I really enjoyed the Zoom family reunion. Lately, I've been burnt out and kind of pissed off, and kind of like difficult, and also like the home situation's been a little difficult. But I've been trying to persevere and chase down my work as much as possible. Like I said, all my master's exams are done, and I'm going into the new school year working from home remotely for the program that I'm at, where I teach special ed and work with special needs kids, and then as well as going for my master's program to work with the visually impaired, and I'm specifically going for an orientation mobility credential to kind of teach like blind people how to walk around and orient themselves in the community. So I'm really grateful to be in the program at San Francisco State for the support I've had from my family and from my friends, Amir, Taldrew, Miles, who's brewing some pretty crazy mead. He's what is it? Moonshining. He's moonshining some mead, like a lava lamp, but it's a Viking lava lamp because it's just bubbling and you can see the mead. It's all fermenting. The yeast is turning over and bubbling. So, shout out to my friend Miles. Right now things are tough, but all the people that I know are working their asses off and are trying to stay productive. I'm trying to do that. I've got a guitar student, Abe, who I'm now teaching. And that's really fun because it really reinforces like the need for me to consolidate all the information that I know as a musician and like transcribe that in a manner that my student can understand it and make it like approachable. At a really early level, I'm teaching him, the circle of fifths and like some actual heavy lifting music theory, while also studying like the pentatonics, and I'm trying to introduce him to the circle of fifths with the pentatonic system. And learning how to play basically in all 12 keys in the first position, and learning to play like all 5 of the pentatonic shapes in that position and moving through them. So I'm looking forward to kind of like teaching Abe and doing everything else that I'm doing, but also Abe's a friend, and it's just good to talk shit with a buddy of mine while playing some guitar. So I'm trying to do as much as I can to stay productive. I'm running 3 times a week, at least twice, but usually 3 times, and I'm working out twice a week at the bench press that I have set up in the backyard. Again, shout out to my parents for digging it out of the garage and helping me set it up in the backyard and letting me work out in the backyard. So I know that the whole COVID-19 has made everything kind of shitty and miserable because you're stuck inside and you feel gross and disgusting being inside all day, especially when it's hot and you're sweating and you're just like stuck sitting in a chair in your room working your day job from home. Even if you get to wear whatever you want, it still kind of sucks. So I'm trying to stay as productive as possible. I hope you stay that way. I hope you are productive. I hope you find ways to engage and be active. And if you feel frustrated, understand you're not the only one who is frustrated and is feeling stifled. Just remember that there's always something else you can do. I'm trying to learn bass, and I'm trying to teach myself 7-string guitar, and I'm trying to learn Iron Maiden and Motorhead and Bungie bread fan covers on bass. And it's really easy to be discouraged by other people. There's this young woman who I've seen on YouTube who's been lately posting like Lamb of God and Mastodon covers, which is like the stuff that I love to play myself. But I don't really have any videos of me playing music as a cover. I just have, art videos. So my goal is when I get my new computer rig set up to record myself playing covers of those songs that I really like. But even then, I'm not going to compare myself to her because there's no point in that. And, she put out her videos like 2 years in advance, She's got like a cover of Mother Puncher from 2018, and that's something that I still aspire to record myself playing and putting out on YouTube. So if you feel like struggling to find motivation, or if you feel like overwhelmed, or if you feel like, you know, you can't compete, just know that it doesn't matter. Apply yourself to something. If you feel like you're outgunned and you can't stick the landing or make the shot, like, don't worry about that. No one's gonna really care. Just, you know, make whatever it is you can. I know that that sounds like really easy coming from me when I spent all this time making this piece of art, and I'd like to think that I'm somewhat established as an artist and becoming more established, but like, I guarantee you there's a lot of work that I've made that's not as flattering as this, and I am going to have to photo document all of it and put it on my gallery on the acid drip and just put my portfolio out there. I guarantee you when you just put what you have out there, even if it's not the best thing you have, just by putting something out there, you're still putting your best foot forward, because that's always better than not putting something out. It's always better to put something out and to try than to just kind of hide and keep your portfolio under a pile of fucking papers on a desk that's covered in other bullshit, you know, which is what my art desk looks like right now in my room. So, you know, get out there, put your portfolio out there, put your stuff out there. If you feel intimidated, don't. Just try your best. Figure out ways to be motivated and to make your practice and your creativity more unique and less like repetitive. And just, I hope the best for you guys while you're going through COVID. And, you know, just stay creative and keep at it. Thanks for watching. I'm Keenan Fry. This is the Acid Drip. And I really appreciate your support, and I'll have more soon. Thanks. See you later. This is the Acid Drip. I'm out of focus. Now I'm in focus. Out of focus, in focus, out of focus, in focus.